Hey guys, I'm a Dimension Jumper and today I'll be doing my top 5 favourite openings in video games. Now, with openings in games, I think they have a lot to tell the audience because, as well as setting up, because they have a lot of things to do, like setting up the characters, the story, the villains, the world that you'll be going into and stuff like that. And I think there was a lot of games that I've played over the years that I think have really good openings in terms of how each of those things that I've talked about or just said sets up everything. So for number 5 is World of Light's opening from Super Smash Bros. Ultimate. Now, with this opening, I think this is a really interesting kind of opening because there's only a side story in Smash Bros. Ultimate. You can experience it if you want, but I think when it comes to Smash Bros. As a whole, I think it's mainly about the fighting of the characters and stuff like that. But with World of Light, it's a really interesting opening because it starts off with all the characters, excluding the DLC characters, just like on this cliff and looking at Gleam and all of the crazy and master hands, and then you get to see like Gleam just firing all of these huge laser beams and just taking out everyone apart from Kirby. And I think that one cutscene is such a really cool way of showing off how powerful Gleam is. And then we get to play as Kirby for like the first part of the game or first part of World of Light. And then as we try and find every other fighter and trying to free them from Gleam's control. And then later on, Darkagon, I think that's the name of the other villain in World of Light. But with that one cutscene at the start of World of Light, I think it's a good way of showing how strong this main villain is. And it's just taking out every single character apart from Kirby. And yeah, so cool. And I think it's just a good way of opening World of Light and just showing us the scope of what a villain could do on this kind of scale. So yeah, for number 4 is God of War 2018's opening. Now, with God of War 2018, I think it's a good game it's a good game, obviously, but also it's a good way of showing us, the audience, of how Kratos is trying to move on from his Greek days, in the days where he was killing gods, destroying the whole of Greece, and now he's in Scandinavia or Norway or somewhere there. And yeah, I think with this opening, from the moment he cuts down that tree to the moment he he thinks he's defeated Baldur, in their first fight, is a really good opening because it shows us where Kratos is at this moment in time in his life. And I do like how it's kind of like teaches us about who Kratos is, where he is with his son at the time, and how he's kind of like trying to get used to his new life. And I think one of the good things about this is Christopher Judge. I think he does a really good performance as Kratos in this game, and I think the way that he's trying to control his emotions, like in the game, like you kind of like seeing like as kind of like, I think the best way is like is at the very start when he's cut down the tree and you kind of like see the bandage kind of like falling apart, and it's like, and Kratos is trying to compose himself, and then later on when you're trying to find the deer, Kratos first shouts at Atreus, and then he calms himself down, and then tries to explain to Atreus again, but in a more calming voice. And the opening as a whole is such a good way of introducing us to these characters and just showing us where they are at the beginning, and then kind of like telling us where they could be potentially at the end of the game. So yeah, and also the fight with Baldur is really cool because you don't really know who he is at the start, and then and I do like the twist at the end of the game where you think Baldur is after Kratos, or he knows who Kratos is. But at the end, you find out that he was actually trying to find Freya, who was ashes by the time Baldur came to Kratos' house. So yeah, as an opening, it's a really cool way of just setting up both this game and the next game, but also as a continuation of the God of War series as a whole. So yeah, for number 3 is Skyrim's opening. Now, the beginning bit is a bit of a meme. It's when you're saying, is when one of the characters says, "Hey, you're finally awake." I think that's been turned into a bit of a meme. But that aside, I do think it's a good way of explaining the game a bit, kind of similar to a lot of other games that do this. But I think mainly God of War 2018 and I think some of the other games in this list, because it kind of like explains it to you a little bit, because you're told about the Civil War, about the way of the voiced dragons, and this is only within the first 5 to 10 minutes of the game, and yeah, and it's like, it gives you cherry bits moments, like, oh, here's Ulfric, he's the power of the voice, here's a dragon that shows up at your execution, here's a civil war that's happening at the moment, and you've got all these like different things happening at once. It's like, oh, that's so cool, and you can like go to all these different locations and understand more about the world, as well as the civil war, the return of the dragons, that sort of thing, at your own time. And I think the opening is a really good way of just showing us how the game kind of like goes about and how like the rules work and stuff like that. And yes, it's just a good way of just introducing to all these different characters, all these different players, that sort of thing. And I do like how it's really bombastic in terms of the moment Alduin turns up at your execution and just starts laying waste to Helgen and stuff like that. So yes, it's a really cool, fast opening, and I think that's really cool. So yeah, for number 2, it's Persona 5 as well as Persona 5 Royals opening. Now, these two games basically have the same opening, but Royals version has about a minute and 2 minutes extra, and that's mainly due to Kasumi's entrance towards the end of the palace, when you're trying to escape from all of the policemen. And yeah, I think this is a good opening because this is one of the few games that takes place, or has the opening take place, in the future, and then you're seeing all the events that happen from the past, from the future, and it's also one of those games where explaining it is almost not enough. You have to experience the game and play the game to get a better understanding. And I do like this opening because of how it's done in terms of like, you hear all your party members, but they're all obscured. No, not obscured. All obscured. There we go. All obscured in shadow, and then you don't get to see them properly until the introductions. And I do like how it's done again, but then when you get to that bit in the game, and then you get to see Arsene again, and it's like, it's been like 6 months or so since I awoke to this power, or you awoke to this power, and then try and remember everything you've done up to that point. And the opening as a whole is really cool, and I do like how when Kasumi enters up or appears, she basically helps Joker, and you don't really get to see or know too much about her until she's introduced into the game. So yeah, so I'd say overall, it's a really fun way of just showing us like some of these guys and who they could, or who they are, before we even met them, and that's really cool. And I do really hope that more games do something like that. So yeah. And for number 1 is Breath of the Wild's opening. Now, with Breath of the Wild, it's such a huge, when it was released, it was such a big turning point sort of in the Zelda series, because this was like the first big 3D Zelda game, and there was a lot of things you could do. It kind of took, I would say, the Skyrim approach a bit, in the sense that you have this big bombastic sort of opening sort of thing, and then once that's done, you can go in whichever way you want to go. And there was some stuff that I do like, for example, the big cinematic shots that Link has, or that the player has, when you first step out of the Shrine of Resurrection, and it just like a big old panning shot, there's probably going to be a video or a clip of it in right now while I'm talking. But that one opening shot, to me personally, just shows you the world. It tells you this world, and it basically says you can go in whichever way you want. No direction is the wrong direction, and you can go to that mountain, to that castle, to that little peak over there, to whichever way you want. You can go whatever way you want, and you can experience the world how you want it to be. And yeah, I think overall, the game or the opening just does such a good way of showing you how, like, okay, you've got all these different shrines, here's how you get to them, here's how you do them, they've got all these different puzzles, and yeah, I think doing everything on the Great Plateau is just a good way of just telling you how the game plays and just how it does everything. So yeah, so Breath of the Wild's opening is probably one of my favourite openings in the game ever. So yeah. So that's been my video for my top 5 favourite openings in video games. I hope you enjoyed this video. Don't forget to like, share and subscribe, and I'll see you in the next video.